Welcome, everybody. My name is Michaela Hinia. I'm the Interim Director for the Center for Refugee Studies. And before we begin, I would like to give a land acknowledgement. First Nations peoples have lived on this part of Turtle Island for millennia, stewarding the land, the water, and all that contributes to life in this region. Today, the culture and presence of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples enrich the lands and people of this territory. More than 2 centuries ago, the Mississauga people welcomed settlers to this territory, providing sustenance and engaging in trade and commerce. Between 1781 and 1820, 8 treaties were signed between the Crown and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, who opened their territory to settlement. Today, York University's Keele campus is located on Toronto Purchase Treaty No. 13 lands and is situated on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Haudenosaunee. And this is where today's physical presentation is taking place. Please take a moment to also think about where you yourself are located in the land that you yourself are situated on. Treaty history is foundational, and it's our collective responsibility to honor the land as we honor and respect those who have gone before us, those who are here, and those who have yet to come. We are grateful for the opportunity to be learning, working, and thriving on this land, and we commit to learn the truth and be active in the process of reconciliation. And as I always say at this point, it's just very important for us to remember when we talk about settlement and we talk about forced displacement and we talk about rights, to think about the land and the nature of our relationship with the peoples of this land as we do this work. It is now my pleasure to pass things over to our interim director, Nergis, who will do the introduction and facilitate from here on.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to have Gamze with us. She's a legal scholar and academic whose work specializes in international human rights, refugee law, and migration governance. She is currently, if I'm not mistaken, a postdoctoral researcher at McGill University's Faculty of Law, as well as a part-time lecturer in Montreal. And she works on a number of key issues that are essential for today's discussion. Her areas of expertise include asylum governance. She investigates how global asylum systems are managed, with specific focus on the European Union's role on global mobility policies, externalization of migration control, and she's been working on analyzing policies where states manage migration outside their physical borders, judicial practices and their critique. Her PhD work in particular was a comparative analysis of Turkish and European judicial practices regarding asylum removal and immigration detention. And finally, state responsibility. She's been working on the attribution of international responsibility in the context of asylum cooperation in Europe and beyond. Before joining McGill, she was an assistant professor at the Başkent University Faculty of Law, and she was also a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Gothenburg as part of the ASIL project. She has been working at UNHCR, IOM, and ICMPD. And she has in-depth expertise on legislative processes, assisted voluntary returns, and alternatives to immigration detention. Today, she will be focusing on externalization and in a comparative context. Thank you, Gamze. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nergis and Michelle and Mikael, and having me here today. I'm very excited. So today I would like to, maybe we can share the presentation now, and that will start us off. So maybe I can talk to you about this research as an introduction first. So I'll talk about the safe third country concept, and I would like to frame this as a tool for containment and illegalization of mobility. Before moving on to my case studies, maybe we can skip to the second slide, which will show us a devastating image. If there's any image that stayed with you from the Syrian so-called refugee crisis, I bet it's this one. This is the lifeless body of Alan Kurdi. He was washed up on the shore of Turkish coastal town Bodrum. He was a 2-year-old Syrian Kurdi boy, and together with his family of 5, they were traveling. They fled from the Syrian civil war, and they were trying to cross the Mediterranean to reach the Greek island Kos. Bodrum Kos is a very popular touristic ferry road. Kos is visible with naked eyes from Bodrum, and the ferry ride takes about 30 minutes and just short of 50 Canadian dollars, if you have only, of course, the right kind of travel documents. They were on an inflatable boat operated by migrant smugglers, and they were more than a dozen of people in a boat that was built for 8, and they capsized shortly after they left. Alan and his brother and his mother drowned. Their ultimate destination was Canada, because his father, Alan's father, had a sister who immigrated here in 1992, and her application for refugee sponsorship was rejected to reunite with the family. So they had to make the journey irregularly because Canada rejected this request, and Greece had closed its doors. And this photo was a turning point in 2015 that triggered international attention to what was going on in the Mediterranean. The current global mobility paradigm is dominated by the global north. It rests on the aim of stopping and deterring the arrival of asylum seekers and undocumented migrants, often through preventing departure from countries of origin and transit, which results in deaths, preventable deaths, countless of them like this one. So the safe third country concept and these practices, more broadly, the policies for externalization of migration control, are prime manifestations of the containment trend. And the concept, the SDC concept, represents the fundamental problems in the global asylum regime, and it's inherently incompatible with effective protection of refugees. Specifically, these practices reinforce containment through unbalanced distribution of refugees among host states, and they manufacture illegality of human mobility by undermining the right to choose the country of asylum. For me to set the scene in the next slide, this is why I want to focus on the safe third country concept, because of its key position in this whole paradigm. So through the analysis of safe third country practices in Europe and North America, specifically in EU, Turkey, and Canada, US contexts, I problematize these arrangements that contain refugees in conditions where they cannot access proper, effective protection. The EU-Turkey context underlines the unbalanced distribution among host states, and the Canada-US case underlines how the illegality is constructed through policy interventions. Let's step back, zoom out, and talk about the first externalization and what the concept, SDC concept means. Well, externalization is it's commonly defined as a strategy of shifting state functions that are for migration control, that are typically normally undertaken by a state within its own territory, to shift them to another state's territory. So functions like border controls, processing of asylum applications. This is problematic in essence because rather than addressing the root causes of migration, externalization is geared towards containment to keep asylum seekers and undocumented migrants as far as possible. And this happens, of course, at the expense of their human rights, like right to seek asylum, right to leave any country, including its own, freedom of movement, prohibition of torture, and so on. Some practices of externalization are sanctioning airline companies that allow passengers without proper travel documents, or outsourcing asylum processing to other countries, or simply sending the asylum seekers to other countries, with the concepts such as first country of asylum or the safe third country concept. And where does this concept come from? International refugee law prohibits sending refugees to states where they may risk persecution or other serious human rights violations, but there's nothing in the Refugee Convention that explicitly prevents states to send them to third countries, so to countries that are deemed safe. So then this concept is built on this silence, and it implies that when a person is arriving from a state directly where their fundamental rights are at risk, they can be, if they are not directly arriving from such states, they can be sent to any state that they pass through and that are willing to accept their return. This concept emerged to prevent the phenomena of asylum shopping, refugees in orbit, and arguably to ensure that refugees reach safety. But then when we look at the practice over the years, it has been manipulated and stretched so far that states like Australia or the USA, for instance, are now sending people to countries that they haven't even transited through. So this responsibility sharing is a pretext, and in fact, they contain asylum seekers in neighboring countries and in situations where they are denied of protection. So I'll focus on two case studies, as I said, and in a EU-Turkey context speaks to containment aspect, because when we look at the UNHCR statistics, 67% of refugees and other people in need are contained in neighboring states that are neighboring the states that they flee from. And 73% of them are hosted in low and middle income countries. So there is a huge imbalance in distribution and responsibility sharing. EU-Turkey context speaks to this. And another problem that I mentioned is the manufacturing of the illegality, and the Canada-US Safe Third Country Agreement is exactly the context that is that this is happening. So let's move on to the first case study, and maybe the other also slide. So I just want to make sure that that I can have you visualize what was happening. After the mist influx started in 2011 from Syria, Turkey initially adopted an open border policy, and it quickly became the top refugee hosting country in the world. These photos, the first one on the left is from 2011, and the second one is 2014. The land border between Syria and Turkey, different border points. You can see that this influx went on for years, and this triggered a steep increase also in often deadly irregular passages through Mediterranean Sea towards Europe, because Turkey was so overburdened and people wanted to move on to Europe. Let's move to the next image. So just for you to be able to visualize, this is what it looked like. So you can see Turkey, and then just on the left, Greece here, and in the middle, the East Mediterranean. And we will even zoom in more to see where the actual crisis was happening. There are tiny islands just between Greece and Turkey, very close to Turkey. So in the next image, we will zoom in there. And so this is not even the mainland. This is where I'm talking about. These islands are Greek islands that are like 5 to 15 nautical miles to Turkey. Many of them are visible with naked eyes, as I said, and easily reachable. And let's see the next images. So these are the images that from 2015. The one on the left bottom is from Mytilene. I took that photo myself. So, you know, I think it's a great juxtaposition to see this big cruise ship and the tents from people who were just arriving the island. As you can see, Greece, the other photos, the one on the top is from Lesbos on the left, and the other ones are from Samos. So quickly, the hotspot approach was developed. There was automatic detention in the Greek islands. There were detrimental reception conditions and low resettlement to the EU. Over 1 million refugees and migrants reached Europe by sea in 2015. So dealing with this overflow, what did European and Turkish policy leaders did? They enacted the EU-Turkey statement. As you can see, they are very proud here. And this statement effectively designated Turkey as a safe third country for the EU. Turkey agreed to take back migrants who crossed irregularly to the Greek islands, like Alan Kurdi, for instance, from Turkish shores. And also Turkey agreed to prevent irregular migration towards Europe. For each return to Turkey, EU committed to resettle one Syrian asylum seeker from Turkey. So this was called the one-to-one scheme. And EU also poured money to Turkey, extensive financial support that reached now, in the coming year, it will reach 12 billion euros in total. So with this, there are many problems with the EU-Turkey statement, like whether Turkey is really a safe country for refugees. What about the sustainability of results through EU support? What happens when the money is cut? Or we can talk about the legitimacy in the cooperation, but I would like to focus on the containment aspect. Almost 10 years later today, this one-to-one scheme, one Syrian to one Syrian, let's say, what happened is a total of 48,000 Syrians were resettled from Turkey. Remember that at its peak, Turkey hosted 3.8 million refugees. So this was like 1%. And now there are close to 2.5 million refugees still in Turkey. And out of 4.8 million total, 4.4 million are continued to be hosted in neighboring countries like Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt. So not just Turkey. So we see that this EU-Turkey statement became a machinery of containment. Effectively, the number of resettlement to EU is minimal. The number of refugees who were able to reach EU is minimal compared to the size that is hosted in the region. This leads to a troubling situation because after a few years of, remember I said Turkey implemented an open border policy. After a few years of this imbalanced situation, by 2018, Turkey started building this wall. And with it in its border with Syria. This is the third longest wall in the world after the Great Wall of China and the infamous US-Mexico border wall, if it was completed. This is a testament to the domino effect created by the externalization policies. When you externalize migration control, they are reproduced in the countries affected by them. This is also visible in Turkey's efforts to enter into readmission agreements with third countries, which these efforts increased after the EU-Turkey statement. Turkey signed a total of 8 up until the EU-Turkey statement, whereas after that, 7 readmission agreements. Readmission agreements make the third countries into safe third countries in effect. So combined with policies of externalization, this is how the safe third country practices contribute to a global asylum regime of reinforced containment, because it brings a world vision, combined with this all other deterrence tools. We live in a world of architecture of repulsion, combined with all other externalization tools. The aim that aim to keep asylum seekers and other unwanted migrants as far as possible. It is not possible for asylum seekers to travel directly to distant lands without passing from safe third countries first. So what the concept and the world vision that is created by this concept tries to do is to create a world where refugees are contained in the regions of crisis in the neighboring countries, where only to where they can travel directly, because to others they cannot travel directly anyway. So this is how the safe third country becomes a tool for ultimate destination countries to avoid responsibility. Let's move on to Canada and US and see how illegality is manufactured by the safe third country concept. So here we see the border. Until Canada and the US has entered into a safe third country agreement in 2004, it was possible for asylum seekers who arrived anywhere at the Canadian border to have their asylum claims heard. So this allowed asylum seekers to enter Canada in a safe and orderly manner and present themselves to authorities at official entry points to seek asylum. After 2004, with the Safe Third Country Agreement, Canada designated the USA as a Safe Third Country Agreement. Everything changed. Asylum applications submitted at the official ports of entry would no longer be admissible, and applicants could be sent back to the US. So what happened? Because the Safe Third Country Agreement only applied at the official border crossings, this caused refugees, of course, to seek irregular ways to enter Canada. Hence, the Roxham Road arose. So this is a country road that is, we can see in the map, 50 kilometers south of Montreal and 500 kilometers north of New York City. This emerged as the major irregular route from US to Canada. And this is how diversion, we can see here diversion of what used to be an orderly mobility into irregularity as a direct result of the safe third country arrangements. Although the journey became a bit more dangerous for asylum seekers, Roxham Road still provided a relatively orderly passageway. But then, almost 20 years later, it was amended in 2023. And the application of the safe third country concept expanded to cover the entire land border, including unofficial border crossings. This effectively shuts down the Roxham Road for orderly passage and it brings an additional layer of irregularity and makes access to asylum even more difficult, and the journey to safety even more riskier. The illegality of mobility is again reproduced with one more step through this policy intervention. There are, again, just like in EU-Turkey statements, we could talk about other problems. Here also we could talk about other problems in implementing. For instance, asylum seekers cannot seek for asylum within 14 days after entering Canada. How this will be implemented, how to prove, I'm sorry, the word Turkey is stayed there, but how to prove connection to the USA, how to prove connection to the safe third countries is the meaning, and how to ensure that the assessment of safety is made on a personal basis are all problems associated with the Canada-US safe third country agreement and other safe third country arrangements. But I would like to talk about the manufacturing of illegality a bit more. So we witness here a step-by-step thickening and closing of the borders for asylum seekers. This context is actually, the Canada-US context is the perfect example of to show the isolated impact of how gradually externalization policies through the safe third country concept augment and increase. Because in contrast to the European context, where the dominant flows are, it's geographically close to conflict zones. Spontaneous arrivals are the normal mode of arrival. Compared to this, Canada-US context is relatively isolated geographically, but then again, even arrival of much fewer irregular migrants between 2017 and 2019, there were 60,000 arrivals, and even this was enough to trigger the public perception of a migration crisis. Compared to the European numbers, these are minimal, of course. There are, of course, there are other factors like isolated geography and the habitude of selective pre-designed arrivals, creating this perception. But I want to focus on, I want to talk about consequences as well. In fact, with this Safe Third Country Agreement itself, was how the refugees are diverted into this irregular terrain, creating this illegality. And this in turn fuels anti-refugee public sentiments and manufactures a crisis perception and becomes an evidence even for further restrictive policies. So by pushing asylum claims underground, the agreement itself increases the vulnerability of refugees, making their journey more dangerous and opening up a market for smugglers. In the end, because the closing of borders, we know that it doesn't deter mobility, it just makes it more dangerous. So this situation at the individual level defies the territorial origins of asylum. The very idea of asylum comes from the moral responsibility towards a person who arrives at your doorstep and that is in danger. And the legitimacy of denying asylum seekers this protection, and also the agency to choose which country they want to seek asylum from, is very questionable morally and under international law. And we see that the Safe Third Country concept here acts as a legal tool that creates this illegality of secondary movements, despite the argument that it's actually a tool for tackling it. So this is how I see the Safe Third Country Agreement first creating the Roxy mode, and then illegalizes its use by asylum seekers. I want to wrap up to connect these two contexts into the global context. I try to demonstrate how parallel efforts in global north now is leading to an expanded use of the Safe Third Country concept. Because when you combine Europe with North America, it really makes a very important portion of global north. And this shows to us a common trajectory of where the global asylum regime is going, the trajectory of reinforced containment and illegalization of human mobility. EU-Turkey statement here underlines the unbalanced distribution of responsibility for refugees, and Canada-US Safe Third Country underlines how illegality is constructed through legal fictions. The ultimate problem I see here is not the refugees that are seeking safety and a better life, but rather the arrangements that contain them, where they cannot effectively access protection. I think I will stop here with a final note. Thank you very much for listening. This research is now published just today, actually, as part of a blog series that we published with 10 more colleagues, and I had the pleasure of also editing with two other colleagues the blog forum. So Externalizing Asylum blog is now under the auspices of the Externalization Working Group of the Refugee Law Initiative. It's a London-based network of scholars, and I'm coordinating the working group on externalization. And here you can see also, in addition to my post, diverse perspectives from other geographies like Africa, Australia. There is a post on Canada, just focusing on Canada, US. There are a couple of posts focusing on EU measures on externalization and sector countries. So I invite all of you to check it out if you're interested on this topic. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Gamze. That was wonderful, and it's definitely a very timely topic and discussion. Shall we open the floor for questions? I don't see, let me open the chat so I can actually see the order that the questions come in. So the floor is open. I can see the names of quite a few of our own scholars and students. Is there anyone in the audience who is working on externalization and safe third country agreements? Well, yeah, here we go. I see one. Siobhan, could you speak to the current practices in the US of attempting to pretermit asylum applications based on asylum cooperative agreements? Can you see the question in the chat, Gamze?
Yes, I can see. Can you please expand a bit? Asylum cooperative agreements you mean by US with in the Americas with the Latin American countries? I bet. Yes, I bet that's what you mean. Yes, great. Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. I mean, this exactly. I mean, with also Colombia, with Mexico, the USA has arrangements, has bilateral arrangements like that. So, and this really speaks to this global trajectory that I was referring to, because we can see. I mean, the whole domino effect here again. Well, up north we see the Canada-US Safe Third Country agreement, but down in south, USA is trying to do the same thing, trying to designate, for instance, Colombia as a safe third country for Venezuelans, regardless of the safety problems and the questionable safety standards in Colombia, both for its own nationals, but also for asylum seekers. So we see that here. I think the question that we need to ask is, when we are talking about the conditions and safety of the third countries, is not so much about the standards there, but rather to notice that who is asking this question, who is asking, for instance, whether Colombia is safe for Venezuelans or not. It's the US who is asking and answering this question unilaterally when it's affecting a safe third country transfer. So here there is already a predetermined intention to realize a safe third country transfer, and this is, I think, what is problematic about this kind of cooperative arrangement. So we can see that all throughout the American continent, this is happening from US up north and from the US down south. Thank you so very much for your question. I hope I was able to answer.